Where did the road go? Off-road edition. Welcome to this off-road edition of Where Did the Road Go, and I'm here with Saxon, a.k.a. Super Inframan.
Hello, hello.
Because this subject, I felt, fell right into your purview. You know a lot about avionics and stuff.
Yeah. I'm an old aviation head and got to kind of work in that area for a while at a point in my life, and so I have lots of thoughts. I have no conclusions, but I have lots of thoughts.
Well, it's better really to just ask more questions, right? Ask the right questions and not worry about the conclusions in a way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And, in our Slack, Chris said something that really it makes a lot of sense, and something that I keep going back to is like, there's all kinds of stuff in our sky. We just don't hear about it. Some of it's like just random balloons and things that float up there. But the thing about radar with airplanes and all that is like it picks up clouds, it picks up flocks of birds. Mm-hmm. There's a weather phenomenon called Virgo, which is sort of like rain that sort of condensates, but it doesn't reach the ground.
Oh.
Yeah. And radar picks all these things up. And you could be flying along in a little airplane at, 2 miles high, and suddenly there's like rain droplets hitting your canopy, but there's no clouds. Stuff like that. So, radar, the reason it can identify aircraft more directly is, its airspeed is part of it. But the other thing is aircraft generally have a transponder code. And
right.
It's kind of like a barcode, like when you're buying something at the store. If you're doing VFR, you would put in 1200. If you're going to like talk to the tower and have them give you directions the entire time, they'll give you a specific number to use while you're flying that particular flight. But that's how they always know where you're at. Otherwise, you're just a dot on their radar. So if you see like, this is kind of interesting when people do illegal things like fly an airplane across the border with drugs, they won't use a transponder.
Right. Yeah.
And they try to fly lower and a little slower because they're like, they're not paying attention to me. I'm trying to look like I'm something small on their radar, essentially.
Yeah.
But all of that is to say, there's a lot of stuff in our airspace, and balloons, as far as being like something used for surveillance, are not a bad idea. And that's something I love following anyway with airships and what have you. But the reasons those have become popular in a way over the last 50 plus years is we know when satellites fly over. They're on a schedule.
Oh, right.
So,
right.
If the foreign agent satellite flies over, we know it's going to be over between 1:30 and 2 o'clock, every day. And, the skunk work guys, this is in a couple of books. I always find it hilarious. When they knew the satellites were flying over, particularly the ones that took like infrared photographs, they would go and take a back-mounted heater or kind of like blowtorch or something and trace out designs of fake aircraft on the tarmac.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so the satellite, would see airplanes that didn't exist. But of course, that country that was using that satellite had to panic and figure out what was going on. So it was a really useful way to get misinformation to your adversaries and mislead them even more. And I think that's why initially when the first balloon was seen, they kind of just let it go. Yeah. Because these things probably been flying over us for a decade.
Right.
And we've been dealing with them passively as opposed to going and shooting them down. But, I go back and forth on why we made the effort to, shoot the first one down and how that's kind of turned into a whole thing now.
People.
Go ahead, Seriah.
People have been asking me constantly what I thought of right from the beginning. Mm-hmm. And from the beginning, I'm like, I don't know. It's a balloon. I mean, why is this such a big deal to everyone? And it very well could have been a weather balloon, or it could have been a spy balloon. We all have them. Every country probably has these things floating around in the atmosphere.
Right. And in our military bases and things like that are used to dealing with these things. So I imagine they weren't too concerned about it getting any information they didn't want it to have.
Right.
I've told this story on the show before, but I had a little experimental aircraft, a Long Easy, and I was flying it one day. I say one day. It was at nighttime, and I was near a MOA, which is a military operation area, and those are only active certain times of the day. But when they're inactive, you can fly through them. I wasn't flying through it. I was next to it. But it was inactive. But what happened, oddly enough, is all of my navigation and communications equipment stopped working.
Oh.
Didn't like go off, but like I couldn't hear anything. The signal, I suppose, coming in and out of the GPS was messed up because it kept resetting. It was scary, especially flying at night, because if you don't have your gauges and things, like, you don't know where you are.
Yeah.
Which can turn into a real problem real fast. But I had just a good old ball compass, like that floats in water in there too. And so I turned 180 degrees and went back towards the airport I had left from. And once I got a certain distance from the MOA, everything started working again.
Yeah.
But I say that to say, like, this was just a passive thing that they were probably using, checking their equipment at the Air Force base or military base. And that messed with my equipment. So if we know something like this is going over, they can probably either send bogus information to it, or, we have things like microwave arrays and what have you that they could just point at it and fry its electronics, I'm sure.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So, go ahead, Seriah.
General Glenn Verherrick, who
Yes.
is the commander of North American Aerospace Defense Command and U.S. Northern Command, said that NORAD started searching for much smaller, slower-moving flying objects while also making adjustments to filtration based on altitude. Normally, NORAD's radar detection is searching for fighter jets or bombers, which move at high speeds, which is basically what you were saying. What we're seeing is very, very small objects that produce a very, very low radar cross-section. These are very, very slow objects in the space, if you will, going at the speed of the wind, essentially. He believes the increased ability to detect these objects can be attributed to radar adjustments and that operators are on heightened alert and looking more closely for these smaller and slower objects, which is why we've seen a bunch of them all of a sudden.
And they've probably always been there. And I would love to talk to some of the guys that used to work at the air traffic control around here and see what they have to say about it. Because, when you're out flying, they'll ask you questions like, hey, is there a flock of birds off to your left about, X height or altitude away? And, you can confirm that traffic, and then they'll report that onto other aircraft. So, they were probably seeing these things the entire time. They just weren't a priority to look at.
Yeah.
But I do think shooting it down was something done for optics.
Yes.
I go back and forth if it was, one, people don't understand that these things can be neutralized passively. So shooting it down was the only way for everybody to know that it was taken care of. But then I also wonder if it's just let's make a big deal about this. We'll take the opportunity to create the commotion around it. Also use that to kind of, gouge China a little bit.
Yes.
And, and go from there. And it may be a combination of all the above. I think the government is very good at being opportunistic when these things present themselves.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, I feel like that's probably a big part of it. Van Herk that you mentioned, they asked him what he thought it was, or if it was, aliens or whatever, if he was ruling that out. And he was really interesting with his answer because he says, well, I'm waiting for these agencies to weigh in and say what it is, but I'm not ruling out anything. Which is just vague enough to let you wonder. But also him not commenting at all.
Yeah. So, the New York Times today, February 13th is when we're recording this, wrote the article headline is a timeline of the UFOs that were shot down this weekend, which, of course, immediately gives people the wrong idea.
Yeah.
And it feeds the disclosure crowd who are thinking, oh, maybe they really shot. So, first of all, you think all of a sudden we have the technology to shoot down UFOs when we haven't all this time?
Right.
First of all. And second of all, they're balloons.
Yeah. The UFO thing is interesting, particularly with how much work has been used to shift the terminology to UAP in official channels to try and get these things taken a little bit more seriously. But, as we've seen, UAP doesn't, spark the chatter the way UFO does. And so when you put UFO out to the general public, like, man, everybody jumps on it.
Yep.
And, UFO Twitter is having a field day. And I saw some stuff that I couldn't decide if it was tongue-in-cheek sarcasm or if it was somebody's real thoughts, but they were arguing that, maybe the delay on some of the briefings from the Pentagon was because they were debating over whether or not to reveal grays and reptilians or just the grays. And I'm like, okay, that's a big jump. From something that's probably a little bit more prosaic, like a balloon that was, spying on us. And it may have also been gathering weather data, because why not? You do both for cover.
Sure. Well,
but yeah, go ahead, sir.
in this New York Times article, they list the thing. So February 4th, a Chinese spy balloon is shot down over the Atlantic Ocean. And they have the whole thing. The balloon entered Alaskan airspace on January 28th, Pentagon officials said, and later drifted from Idaho southeast to the Carolinas before it was shot down on February 4th. Mm-hmm. So let's see. How is this broken down? Oh, I see. Okay. February 10th, the UFO was shot down off of Alaska. A U.S. fighter jet brought down an unidentified object over the waters of Alaska. The object broke into pieces after being shot down and was most likely not a balloon. Mm-hmm. It was the size of a small car. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the object
go ahead,
it was headed toward the North Pole before it was struck down.
Mm-hmm. And I'm dubious of the not a balloon and what that means. Because, we have rigid airships and things like that, too.
Yeah.
That's something the U.S. has been working on for a long time because it's just like we were talking about surveillance and satellites earlier. We use those to loiter over battlefields at high altitudes and do reconnaissance, essentially. But is it a balloon because it's a rigid airship, or is it not a balloon because it's a rigid airship?
Right.
I think they're splitting hairs to keep from saying anything.
It continues. February 11th, the UFO shot down over Canada. They're all coming over Alaska, interestingly. The American F-22 fighter downed another object on Saturday over the Yukon Territory, which borders Alaska. The object, which a Canadian official described as cylindrical and smaller than a spy balloon, was picked up on radar Friday as it passed Alaska. And then February 12th, a UFO was shot down over Lake Huron. An object that first appeared over Montana on Saturday reappeared on Sunday before being shot down over Lake Huron off Michigan. The object, which was flying at 20,000 feet, had an octagonal structure with strings hanging off of it, but no discernible payload.
Yeah, and see, that's interesting to me, too, because I think that when they also mentioned that they felt like it was interfering with the plane's communications equipment. But when you hear strings hanging off but no payload, I'm like, was that something that was tied down somewhere?
Oh, yeah.
And it got loose, and those were the moorings from it?
That makes sense.
So, I mean, you could go either way with that.
It says here that national security officials on Sunday discounted the possibility that the object shot down over the weekend might have extraterrestrial origins. However, Glenn Vaherick, as you said, I haven't ruled out anything at this point. February 13th, the objects were not sending signals, but did pose a threat, the White House says.
Okay.
White House officials say 3 unidentified flying objects shot down between 10th and 12th posed a very real threat to civilian air traffic, but were not sending out any communication signals.
Okay. And that is a common, that's where commercial aircraft fly, between that, 20 to 40,000 feet range. The one thing that did cross my mind is they were observing the first balloon. Was as they were looking at it closer, did they realize that the balloon was better at gathering data than they thought? And so that kind of put a little bit of a panic on, like, oh, we thought we were handling these things just fine, and it turns out we're not. And maybe that's a little bit of the extra gusto in shooting these things down. But I don't know. I can't think of anything to point to that specifically, because I really still think it's an optics thing.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. Chinese authorities said they were preparing to shoot down an unidentified flying object spotted near the Yellow Sea. This was from February 12th. Local authorities in China's eastern Shandong province said that on Sunday they had spotted an unidentified flying object. Words are hard. And were preparing to shoot it down. The objects were spotted near the coastal city of Rizhao. I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong. On the Yellow Sea, and authorities reminded fishermen to be safe.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, to me, that sounded like, oh, no, this is happening to me, too.
Yes.
Definitely not ours. That's just something that, these things happen.
Yeah, that's exactly what it sounds like. Or, we also have balloons up there. We shot down one of theirs, and there's like, okay, well, we're going to shoot down one of yours now,
Yeah, yeah. I assume that happens quite a bit. We don't hear about it. But like I say, of course we're spying on everybody. Everybody's spying on us.
Right, exactly.
That's how the world works.
Yeah, Pentagon memo says object shut down over Canada was a small metallic balloon.
Okay.
So again, I mean, how people are trying to push extraterrestrial on here is kind of puzzling. There is this, and this struck me as very odd. Mystery wall of green lasers spotted in Hawaii.
Yeah, so I just saw that right before we got on the show together. I don't know anything about it except the headline.
Yeah, okay, so what happened is a mystery wall of green lasers spotted in Hawaii are likely to come from a Chinese satellite has emerged, but that is not what they said at first.
Okay.
So they thought it came from NASA's ICES or ICESat-2 satellite. The satellite tracks and measures Earth's surface to keep track of. It says to keep track off sea ice and forests. So it was a typo and it was screwing me up. However, according to NASA, the lasers came from them. It would have been via its advanced topographical laser altimeter, which emits beams that are bright green on the visible spectrum. After some research, it was confirmed on February 6th that the satellite did not belong to NASA and was most likely Chinese.
Yeah,
so
that's interesting.
What strikes me about this, I mean, it would still probably just be checking the atmosphere and monitoring, like it's nothing nefarious. Uh-huh. But I feel like it probably was us.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And, someone stepped in and said, no, it's China.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good point. That's a very good point. Because I my thought was like, well, if it's Chinese and these other things are happening, what if this is like, we're trying to find different ways to make a show because at some point we still want Taiwan,
Yeah.
But it makes a lot of sense to flip that propaganda back on them. And don't get me wrong, I'm very pro-American in the in general, but you have to think about how we like to use optics, use propaganda. Yeah, like, oh no, that was definitely China, man.
What I can say with the utmost confidence is none of this involves alien technology.
Yes, I 100% agree. It would be interesting to see if some somewhat high strangeness type things start happening as we focus on this. But, just with the trickster aspect of the phenomenon. But I think this is all terrestrial stuff that we're dealing with.
And also, what's going on that they're putting this stuff out there like this that we're not supposed to be looking at?
Right.
Because that's the other question. If the news is just, like I was telling you, I had a friend of mine take me down to my mechanic's, drop off my car. Mm-hmm. And he had a CD in it. He popped it out real quick to put something else in he wanted me to hear. And like some news station came on, all they were talking about were these balloons.
Yeah.
And I'm like, there's other stuff going on. Why are these things just engulfed the American interest like in such a way like it makes me really suspicious that there's other stuff that's just getting buried.
I think so. And, Chris and AP mentioned I guess you would call it, not a natural disaster, but the disaster going on in Ohio with the train derailment there. And whether or not this was intentionally set up to distract from that, I certainly think that it was used as an opportunity to distract from it.
Yeah.
Not too long ago, a lot of the rail workers were trying to go on strike and protest for like different safety measures and things.
Yeah.
How many engineers have to be on like each mile of train and all this kinds of stuff. And I mean, that's been very, very recent, and they got no support pretty much whatsoever from anybody.
Yeah.
And so now for this to happen where there's like an ungodly amount of vinyl chloride being released.
Yes.
Yeah. It's not a one party thing did this or another party did that or anything. It's everybody going like, that's not us. We didn't do that. That's terrible. Nobody remembered that we said you didn't have to do safety checks.
Right. What? When did that happen versus the first balloon?
Let's see. I'm not quite sure.
Because that would be interesting if it lines up directly.
Yeah. Let's see if I can find it here real fast.
Ohio train accident 2023.
It looks like February 3rd.
And the balloon was I just closed everything. You would think I don't know how to use this stuff. I'm sure just searching balloons at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so the first hit I get from Reuters is from February 3rd.
So the same day.
Yeah. Now, they may be reporting a little after the person that originally saw it, but virtually the same day. Go ahead, Seriah.
Well, this is posted 5 hours ago. China is accused of sending balloons over Taiwan now.
Okay. I would not be shocked at that at all.
No, not even slightly.
Mm-hmm.
At least 4 batches of balloons over Taiwan in February and March 2022. But the latest numbers suggest that China's surveillance program against Taiwan is much more aggressive than previously known.
I mean, it may turn out that this has been... they may have been caught with their pants down a little bit with all of this, thinking that it was not as effective as it actually is, and that some of the aggressiveness are... If they're kind of realizing that this was going on over Taiwan so significantly, it's like, okay, we're going to shoot them down over our country to let them know that our practice going forward is we're going to shoot these down over Taiwan too.
My concern is it's the start of propaganda to push for a war with China.
Yeah. Oh, it probably is. It probably is.
Whether they get there or not is a totally different story, but we've seen in the past how they have just kind of... Yeah, all you have to do is look at the last 20 years to see how many times they've lied about things to start wars, or just started wars without any provocation.
Yeah. It's interesting. The geopolitical politics of the world is strange stuff because China has been helping Russia a bit more over in the situation in the Ukraine, and so everybody's looking for different leverage now too. Yeah. And I assume China is watching all of that with an eye on what they're planning to do with Taiwan, because I assume at some point they're going to try to invade Taiwan. Like that.
Yes.
That's been one of those long-standing, it's just a matter of the day that the right people are in the room, or the wrong people, really. But it's something that we're going to have to deal with at some point.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what we can say with a fair amount of confidence is that none of this stuff is paranormal, extraterrestrial, anomalous. It's all either balloons, simply put, just either spy balloons or weather balloons and we're agitating stuff, or it's just a smokescreen to not look at other stuff that's going on right now.
Yeah. I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right.
Or it's two things. It's propaganda to help, make China look bad in American eyes, while at the same time going, don't look over here, like at that train derailment, because that's right on the same day. Yeah,
and I would encourage anybody to go look up some of that stuff if they haven't had a chance to hear or read about the train derailment. It's pretty scary stuff. I heard one person refer to it as mini Chernobyl.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's not the worst description of it. It's pretty horrific.
It says there were more toxic chemicals in that train derailed in Ohio than originally reported. Among the substances were ethanol, glycol, monobutyl ether, and isobutylene. I just massacred most of those. But yeah, this stuff is very, very bad, and it's what did Chris say? It was killing pets and stuff like that already.
Yeah, killing pets, and of course, it's getting into the water table, and some of that stuff. It's kind of like a boiling point of 8 degrees Fahrenheit when it's released.
Oh,
and it's also highly flammable. And of course, they set it on fire. But the vinyl chloride, if I understand this right, is very good about when it's either turning into a gas or whatever else, will attach to moisture in the air, and it basically goes through a process of becoming hydrochloric acid.
Oh, well, that's what you want. Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. It's one of those things you're like, oh, that's not good at all. And the stuff I had read about it was citing the worst derailment with just that vinyl chloride was 23 to 25,000 pounds of the chemical in one train car, and there was something like an order of magnitude of 5 times more or something like that with this situation in Ohio. So there's a lot going on there that's not good.
And maybe it would have been, prevented had they just given the rail workers a little bit more money and some rest.
Yeah, exactly. And I hired some more rail workers too.
Yeah.
Because I think, something like one engineer for however many miles of train now, it's ridiculous.
Right.
The amount that one person has to be in charge of. But I'm not an expert on trains.
Yeah, me neither.
So I don't know all the arguments, but I know that they were saying it's not safe. We need more people and more rest and more help. And then this happens.
And they weren't asking for a lot. That's the most ridiculous thing, is that they weren't asking for very much.
Yeah.
And they were just kicked out like they were, like being ridiculous. It's like, no, these seem like very reasonable and easy to grant requests.
Yeah. Exactly.
But that's our world today.
Yes, unfortunately it is. It drives me crazy.
All right. Well, that's we can, unless you have anything else you want to add, I think
we covered everything really well.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me, Saxon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Seriah.
You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.